Okay, I'm going to do something slightly different because I'm sort of coming from a particular discipline here, which is design and technology. It's not my discipline; it just happens to be what I teach. But really, I'm working from the point of view of a course that we've designed and are running, and the research that's been associated with it. So. Um, this is an initiative of the Victorian State Government. They're putting about $10 million into out-of-field teaching in STEM, of which we got $1.1 million of it. And it's because in technologies, this course in design and technology has a sister course in digital technologies, which is run by Julie Lynch. But I'm running the design tech, so I'll talk about that. It's because, as you've seen from previous stats, technologies tends to be the area, the discipline within secondary schools, which is most out of field. We had a certain amount of constraint on what we did for the design of it, but we also had something which the constraints was it had to be basically 2 consecutive days of face-to-face teaching each term. It also had to be a grad cert, so it had to have assessment. The requirement was 50% of the places went to rural and regional. Actually, we actually satisfied that without any trouble, actually. And we also have an equal gender mix, partly because design and technology used to be sewing, cooking, woodwork and metalwork, so it divides quite evenly up between males and females. The things that there's very generous support for teachers to be able to take part in this. If they're more than 70k away from where we had them, and we've had them in Melbourne and Geelong, they get to travel. They get travel and accommodation. But we actually put together a number of support systems, one within the university, which we called Circles, with a very long word there. But also we hired experienced design and tech teachers to act as mentors for small groups. For each of the 9 mentors has 5 teachers who's associated with it. That was something we put into the bid, and it didn't cost a huge amount of extra money, but it certainly was successful. We're still really working out what we're doing there because it's taken a bit of thinking about how we use them. As you can see, it's quite a big team because each of the 4 units has 2 co-chairs, one from engineering, one from education. So somebody knew something about teaching, somebody knew something about the actual subject matter. We also have quite a big and growing research team. But as you can see, we've got 9 mentors. We've got the academic support team, which is Circles, which is quite big. But also the really innovative thing about this, which I think is that we're actually working very closely with the Teacher Professional Association and with a number of technology resource centres that have been established in Victoria. They're called tech centres because we actually have somebody in the Department of Education whose job it is to think up stupid names for new initiatives. And we've been working with 3 of those tech schools. There's 10 around at the moment, another 6 coming. So it's been quite a collaborative process, both within the university, across the faculties, but also across different organisations. There's the 4 units we're teaching. We've got through the first one. We're midway through the second one. And you can sort of see they follow what the design tech curriculum is. We just got a survey back that we did. We got 36 out of the 44 teachers that are currently enrolled. We were supposed to get 50. It's very difficult to get the full number. We had 49. They've dropped back to 44 at the moment. So you can sort of see that, as I said, even though rural and regional is only about a quarter of the Victorian population, we've got around about half of them coming from that. This is the results from the survey, which is not everybody, so it's slightly askew, but it's pretty representative since we've had over 80% response rate. Mostly now they were restricted. They had to come from state schools, so you can see they're coming from main low ICSEA. School size tends towards larger, and the normal mix of experience that you saw in a lot of the other ones. We've got 4 research projects that we've got. They're just sort of starting up because we only just got ethics for it. We're wanting to really think about the pedagogy of design and tech and how that's unique, how making things is actually something that's inherent. That's only just started, so I won't report on that. The journey is based on interviews and a survey, so you'll see some of the things from the survey about their experience so far. We're starting a project which we're doing the legwork for this year, and we'll be running it early next year on systems thinking as a way of thinking about the system of supply of teachers, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And I just started, for a rod for my own back, I wanted to understand why we had 5 that withdrew. And also we've got another 5 from the sister course, the Digitech course. So I'm busy trying to get interviews with them. I've done 2 of those, and I'll show you the results from one of those interviews. Okay, what did we find out? That, okay, there are areas that they have specialization. Wood is very popular. And this is not just experience in teaching, this is experience personal. So there's a very strong overlap between what they do in the school workshop and what they do in their own workshop. And we've actually built on that as a degree. Just the results that lots of you have already shown, that in fact they were quite happy to take this up in most cases. One of the things we asked them was actually where they drew their support for teaching design and tech. They're all supposedly out of field, although the degree of out of field varies widely. So some are tradies who have been coming to teaching, don't have any teacher qualifications. Some are, very experienced teachers which are, passionate about sewing, so they've gone in and doing fabric textiles within the school. So a whole variety. And it was interesting that the curriculum and a lot of the online resources were very important, but a lot occurred within the school. You will notice that down to the right, the Teacher Professional Association was very important, and it's very important for us as well. And interesting, after 6 months, the mentors start to have quite a significant. It'll be interesting to see whether in subsequent surveys that is the case. Where they're confident, you can see that there's, well, actually, one of the things about this group is the diversity, and the diversity of confidence, of areas that their confidence is really interesting. And we'll match that against where they thought their learning needs were, and no surprise, content, knowledge, practical activities came up fairly high. Ways of engaging students and also differentiating students was seen important, although that was actually a prompt question, so I'm not sure. Indigenous elements is important, and we're factoring that quite in. We've got a really great Indigenous design teacher coming to our next intensive. And then it started to go all over the place. A lot of things about engineering, a lot of things about design, design cycle, ways of thinking about that. Use of machinery is very important. They all have to, if they have a workshop with wood or metal, they have to have a safe use of machinery. We can't offer that because we're not a provider for that. So really interesting that a lot of it has to do with practical things. And actually, we asked them so far what they've really liked, and the biggest one was networking, which a lot of you have seen already. But also the fact that it was hands-on, and also they started to appreciate that we are actually trying to push them to think in different ways. One of the challenges in design and technology is to move from sewing, cooking, wood and metal work to it being a design thinking process. So that's been quite important to see that that's starting to have an effect. Okay, let's have a look at our research and again, this is not telling you what we've found out, but telling you what we're going to do. So one of the 4 is really to think about the networks that will enable us to develop the design and technologies teaching workforce. So we're really interested in what are the enablers and barriers, both to design and technology teachers into the workforce, but also improving the quality and the experience of it. Got a bit of bad phrasing there. I'll work on that. And the way, and really starting to think of it as a systems problem rather than any particular problem. The way we're going to do this is to use a technique we've lifted from health, and we have a very strong health research team within Deakin, and we're just relying entirely on their knowledge of how to do this. So it undertakes a series of workshops which bring the great and the good, and from all different sectors, from classroom teachers right up to the academy, to work on the problem. So first off, we kind of create a systems map and look at those connections. We then get a second workshop to really work on that, to revise and do it. And then we bring in a bigger group of people to really identify and prioritize. And we hope actually to make a contribution to the way we think about out-of-field teaching through using this methodology. That will be running, as you can see, in the first half of next year. So it's quite exciting, that one. The second one that I want to talk about is the one that's actually going on at the moment. This is, again, a very small research project. There's only a possible 10 participants, of which I'll only get at best half a dozen. Got 2 so far. And I really wanted to start to understand why we lost our 5 teachers. And so I'm doing interviews with them because they're out of the thing. I can do that even though I'm a teacher, so I can get it's ethically domain. And what we're doing it actually is we're mapping it against the Clark Hollingsworth model, which we think is one of the more sophisticated ways of thinking about how we undertake professional learning. So the Clark Hollingsworth tries to think of teacher professional learning in a series of domains. The personal domain, which is your personal knowledge, beliefs, attitudes. The external domain, which are the kind of external sources. Their professional domain, where they can actually work within the class and within their school. And what they call the domain of consequences. And each of those interacts in the change environment in quite complex ways. So we're not using it to look at the professional learning experience itself, but to really start to think about what is going on with those and it'll be interesting to see if we get any more that drop out. So I've done one interview so far, and I've pseudonym is Sue. And so we've mapped what she said against those domains and as against barriers and enablers within each of those domains. And so what we've done there is to think about, within the personal domain, what were some of the barriers, but also the enablers. Sue had a kind of a real lack of belief in her own academic abilities. And this is not uncommon within design and tech, because you have that kind of movement between the practical and the what Vygotsky would call the scientific, the institutional knowledge. So she quite felt herself, her sort of content knowledge was poor, but she actually still had a very strong desire to learn, and she was very active within that, sometimes annoyingly so. Domain of practice, well, not much happening there. She didn't get a chance to really put much into practice, to be perfectly honest. So this is kind of not going to have much anyway. And that actually may be one of the characteristics of withdrawing teachers. And one of the problems with academic as against sort of more practical. Almost nothing within the domain of consequence, except she was very vociferous about challenging classroom behavior. Okay, external domain. It suddenly hits you. This is why she withdrew. Lack of time, lack of support, a fairly toxic school environment. Actually, interestingly, the collaboration appears both as a barrier and an enabler in quite interesting ways. She had experience in a couple of different schools in teaching design and tech. And so one of the, part of that feeling of that she was part of it was one of them was a Catholic school and she was not Catholic and she just didn't fit in with that culture. Um, the change in curriculum is something everybody finds. We've just had another change in curriculum. It's not as dramatic as it's made out to, and we're working quite well with the teachers to ease that in. It's been done much better than it has been done in the past, actually. But workload, as you can see, and the understaffing which goes with that is huge. So the reason that she really left was not only that she found she just didn't have enough time to work on the grad cert, even though she wanted to, but she was actually thinking seriously about giving up teaching as well. She was finding it just whether she does or not is another question. It's and some of the enablers there were things that you can sort of see. There's the other side of the of some of those things that she was complaining about. Okay, so that's just a kind of a snapshot of what's in progress. Once we've done another 3 or 4 or 5 of them, we'll have a start to put that together and start to do things. One of the things that we wanted to do with this, so overall, okay, sorry, I forgot about this slide. Yeah, just reinforcing what I've said before. Little in the domain of practice and consequence, because in fact, as they drop out, they don't get to engage in that region, which is actually an interesting message about how you're going to retain teachers within professional development. Okay, so this is a fairly small project, and in fact, all of the research projects we're doing kind of tend to be, we've kind of gone for the drone rather than the aircraft carrier model of research. So we're doing lots of small things, and because we've had experience in the past, we've gone for big things and it's never got done. And it will be interesting to see whether this works. I mean, it's still early days yet, and so that's one of the questions, whether this is actually a viable option. But also, I mean, because this is within a very specific discipline, as all of our ones have, but this actually is working within the discipline with those discipline teachers in the process of professional development. The kind of specificity or generalizability of what we're finding out, clearly we're reporting them in design and tech, but how much will it be useful to the rest of you? So leaving at that, I'll finish a minute 44 earlier.